for these calls, I know it's different last time, is that we be vulnerable, and that means everyone puts their videos on and everyone contributes. So no stalking. Because I think, and the reason for that is what we want to try and do is build some sort of sense of community. So for you guys as leaders, people who are willing to step into this stuff, I think it's good to be able to see each other and to, see how people are responding and interacting and learning together. So I know you feel like you got bad hair. I mean, your hair can't be as bad as mine. Mine's all fallen out. So, no. Or as I like to say, I'm like the Velveteen Rabbit. It's just been loved off. There we go. See? So, it's a smaller group, which is great. So, let's just really try hard to engage, encourage, learn.
Chip in,
because I think we can assume a common level of we're committed to Jesus. We want to see the kingdom advance. We want to make a difference. None of us have got all the answers, but we're learning together. And so we want to make this culture where we can all chip in, all say good stuff, things like that.
Ideally, we'd all be in the same room doing this together, building community together. But obviously, that's not going to work for sorts of reasons. So, but that's the feel we create.
Yes. With a cup of tea.
You've got yours.
Yes, you've got to have a cup of tea. There we go. Ted Fong looks like the sort of man who has very good cups of tea going.
And it's actually tea.
Good. It's lovely to see you all. Thank you so much. Thanks for jumping into this.
Carl Martin.
I just want to ask, do we need to do any kind of marital conversation for the Craigs over there? You're sitting like 17 feet apart on your porch. Just checking. All right. Okay, I'm going to pray. Shall I pray? All right. And we'll jump on in. So Heavenly Father, we thank you for this chance to be together. We thank you for the fact that your mercies are new every morning, Lord. For our friends here in Fremont area, we Lord, we thank you for preserving them and their homes and people around them. Lord, we pray for an end to these fires and that you just do a supernatural work there and eradicate them. And Father, we want to pray now that we'll be able to focus in this session and the weeks ahead in hearing what it is you're saying to us, that we really would be better equipped to go and to make disciples at the places of mission where you've positioned us. So Lord, I pray that this would be a time of great encouragement, of iron sharpening iron, of learning together, just tons of stuff that's just really practical and applicable that takes us out into the mission field. So Lord, I pray to help Hannah and me as we facilitate, but also for everyone just with the questions, comments, stories, insights that people bring. And this would be a tremendous time of learning together. And we pray this in your mighty name, Jesus. And we ask for you to send graciously and generously your spirit into our conversations now. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, we're going to start with a story. So, do you want to start the story?
Do you want to start the English, anything to say from England and now or
I think start with the story. Yeah, okay. Start with the story. People like stories.
So, 13 years ago and like 2 weeks, we made the humongous transition to go from England to Oklahoma. And God called us to America. It was quite clear that we were to join this church staff team in Oklahoma City. We actually lived in Edmond, which is a town to the north of Oklahoma City. And we had to look it up on a map when we went because we had no idea where Oklahoma was. I'm not sure had we heard of the musical? I can't even remember. But anyway. So, which,
by the way, is the state song.
Yes.
So everyone sings. So we got there. And we'd been there like a week, and the boys were all going to the same elementary school. It was a brand new school, which was really cool. And they had like a meeting for the families on a Sunday, 10 days before the semester started. So we turn up at this Sunday lunch, bring a picnic. And the principal comes on, and she's doing all these announcements, which are just like English announcements. So we tune them out. And then she goes, right, I won't do the accent, imagine a thick Oklahoma accent. She goes, right, I want everyone to stand up. and we're going to sing a song, which I'm sure we're going to have many, many happy occasions to sing together. So would you stand? And I want to hear you sing out now, nice and loud. We're going to sing together, Oklahoma. And we were like, look at each other like, you know, is there a candid camera on us, or, you know, what's going on? And she literally starts going, Oklahoma, where the wind comes rolling. And so she goes off and everyone joins in. It was just the funniest thing. And so we're watching all this, and I see this, we're at the back, and I see this family over to the side, and they're not singing. And so I shuffle over to them and I go, hey, are you foreign as well? And they go, yep, we're from Texas. So that's Oklahoma.
But anyway, we learned to absolutely love Oklahoma. Some of the nicest, sweetest, most hospitable people. In some ways, it was a taste of the Southern culture. But I mean, some people called it North Texas because there were so many Texas transplants, particularly where we were, because of all the oil. It was a booming, 13 years ago, it was a booming oil place. And so rapidly growing. So we get a house in this brand new neighborhood, and we do what we always do. So we prayed, Lord, you've brought us here. Who are our people of peace? How and where do you want us to do mission? And so quite quickly, it was helped by the Oklahomans being friendly. Actually, half of them were from Texas, but anyway, we got to know quite a few people in this new development. And it was an amazing journey, and they became our family eventually. But we hung out together. So at Christmas or different holidays, just football games or whatever, because of course OU was massive there, and so the big games and what have you. We'd always have these neighborhood cookouts. We fostered real community with those people. Always invited them round, but then they were good at inviting us back.
You'll talk about Carl and Karen. And
yeah, I guess the first people were saying, okay, Lord, who are our people of peace? And Alex is outside the front of the house, and this guy, Carl, walks down with his son. And what did he say to you?
He just asked who we were, and then we started chatting, and we got on really well.
And he basically said, hey, you guys ought to come over, we'll cook out, my wife won't mind. So we went over, and we hit off a great friendship, still in touch with them. And they introduced us to, because they got to know quite a few of the other neighbours, so they acted as gatekeepers to the community, introduced us to a lot of the other neighbours. And so that's when we started hanging out a bit together. We did various parties, so whether it's, you know, football, we'd watch a game, the American or the Oklahoma religion of watching a football game. But
the women all did bunco. So if you know that, the kind of dice game. And it was funny, so like the first 8 times Hannah ever went, she won the jackpot. So I was like, great, mission's awesome, it pays, keep going, girl. So, and then
you were wondering, how do you reach the guys?
Yeah, and quite a few of them like poker. So I said to the guys, let's start a poker night. And so we did that. And that was a great place of building community.
Yeah, and then we thought, okay, how can we press this on a little bit into a bit more spiritual maybe? And so somebody suggested to me, oh, you ought to do a birthday party for Jesus. And I'm thinking, is that really going to go down well? But I suggested it, and everybody thought this was a wonderful idea because they all had young to middle school kids at the time. So we hosted this wonderful party, did some games, lots of fun, and people bought gifts that then we could donate to the local homeless shelter, which we partnered with through our church as well.
And we told a Christmas story, so it had clear spiritual content.
Yeah, it did.
We gave gifts to the families as they left.
Yeah.
And that stuff. And then out of that was really successful. And so we decided that we realized the wives were the power brokers. And so Hannah got together with the women and said, hey, that was really cool. And she said, well, look, what we've found is that friendships get even better when you can relate at a spiritual level as well.
Because I said, you know, when you're struggling or when you need something, I'll come over and help you. I'll cook you a meal or whatever. And I said, I pray for you when you've got issues. But if we can, you know, if we can go into that spiritual conversation together, that just takes relationships even deeper. And some of them were going, yeah, this is where I love Americans. In England, it wouldn't fly because it's more pessimistic. But even though they were probably thinking, I'm not convinced about this, they would go, oh, yeah, probably thinking I'll come to the first one and probably not anymore. And although a couple of them said, well, my husband would never come. He hates anything religious, we don't care. You don't have to love anything. You can just come, do the communal bit, you know, we'll eat together, have fun together, and he can come once if he likes it. If he doesn't like it, leave, whatever. And so it was very invitational, very, you can believe whatever you want to believe. There's no rules or anything. It's just, let's just talk and see what happens. But we want to press into the spiritual side of life together. And so we did the first one, and because we had that bond of community, I think it brought us, we had brownie points. And so
that doesn't translate.
Oh, sorry. We had points in the bank, and so that we could draw on. So they were ready to take that risk with us because of the relational capital that we built. So I think they were a bit skeptical, but they decided, okay, we'll do one. And actually they loved it because it was really non-judgmental, non-religious, although it was Christian. I can't even remember what we did that first time.
I think it felt like it had real depth. And so people were actually having the language I would use is people were starting to have some God encounters. And so that drew them in. And that was what I think really made quite a difference.
So anyway, this went on for, I don't know a couple of years, year and a half, 2 years, something like that before we moved. And then we were able to leave it in the hands of some of the other people when we moved on, which was wonderful. But we had some interesting conversations. I mean, quite a few of the people were like de-churched, had some faith background, but had given it up years ago. But I remember Carl, so our original person of peace, he made some comment towards the end of our time there and said, you know, you get all sorts of Christians who, you know, believe all sorts, but then you get people who are authentic in their faith, like you guys, who there's something genuine, and that is appealing to me. So he'd still not made come to that place of committing his life, but he was so interested, and he was way close to Jesus than he was at the end. And his wife and kids still to this day go to church, which they certainly didn't when we first came.
But most of the group turned from being not engaged spiritually to being engaged spiritually at varying places on that scale over that time with them. And I think one of the reasons we tell that story is because we arrived in Oklahoma and we're foreigners.
Fresh off the boat.
And we have, no credibility. We don't understand the culture. We don't understand the language half the time, let's be honest. It was very different, no relational capital. And yet the Lord was able to use us. So we had an intriguing accent. That was our selling point.
That brought us some.
But other than that, and you use what you've got, don't you? But other than that, like, we didn't have any real, anything to help us on mission. And yet the Lord was able to do something really, significant in that place, and actually also through what we did with the church we're part of as well. So I think I want to encourage you all that you can do similar things as well, because most of you will actually now have friendships that are ongoing. You've in your work or your neighborhood, wherever it is that you're called to be on mission. And so you've already got points in the bank. You've already got credibility. You've already had interesting relationships and conversations in that place. And the Lord can use you. So if he could use us as people who didn't really fit the culture, who are just willing to follow the Spirit into the harvest field, he can do that with you far more so. And we've seen we've literally seen hundreds of people do that with our own eyes. So literally hundreds of people, hundreds and hundreds of people actually.
So you then got the church that we were with in Oklahoma City, you oversaw all this missional community development. And then we moved to Ohio and we did the same thing with our neighborhood there. And again, you oversaw, I don't know how many in that church.
And then, we've coached lots of other churches down. So anyway, we're not sending you our resume, but we want to give you that. So we're going to give you a quick exercise. Actually, one other thing before we do the exercise is this, and I think we've asked this exercise before, but I want to just do it again. One other thing is that part of what our call is that we feel we come from your future. So if you come to our house, we've actually got a DeLorean parked out front with some special, upgrades on it. So that was a joke, by the way. There's a quick Back to the Future reference there. But we come from your future in that in the UK, so in England right now, in the United Kingdom, it's a thoroughly post-Christian culture.
And California is rapidly going that way.
California's going that way, but it's way more Christian than where we lived. So for instance, the city where we moved from, called Sheffield, is now under 2% church-going population. So on a Sunday, less than 2% of the city will go to a church service.
So as soon as you said that you were a Christian, people would look at you like you're completely weird.
Yeah.
So you try to sow that into conversation after people have got to know that you weren't that crazy.
And so what it meant was, as you know, we led a church there, and the Lord blessed it, but we weren't. The way people were going to be reached was not going to be primarily by us saying, "Hey, come to our service," or even "Come to our service, it's really cool," or "Come to our service, we got this fantastic thing happening," because it's this. People just weren't. It wasn't on their radar to think about going to a church service. The way people were going to be reached is we had to work out how to go to them. And so perhaps another time we'll tell you the story of some of the stuff we did with a local elementary school when our kids started going and saw a real move of God happen in that school. But it was very much this, we have to go with the gospel. We have to go to where they are and make disciples in the place of mission. And I think we would want to contend to you guys that the way FCC is going to be renewed for the next generation is obviously keep doing great services, but I think it's going to be much more weight put upon going to those places of mission where the Lord has you and working out how to do church in that environment, how to bring the good news of Jesus in that place, how to make disciples amongst the lost. So just to make it personal for you, the quick question we want to ask you, some of you heard this before when we were doing the previous 7 weeks, but I want you to do it again, which is this. Who would you love to see come to Jesus who's local to you, but they would never come to a Sunday service at church? For whatever reason, it might be a really unfair, invalid reason, but the point is they're not coming. So who would that person be, or who would those people be for you? So I'd like to write it down, or if you're with someone, tell them out loud who those people would be for you. Okay. And if you are by yourself watching us, we'd encourage you to process that if you're, if you're married or with your accountability partner or whoever it is you would process that with, just to keep accountable on that. All right, what we want to do this evening is we're going to talk a bit about what missional communities are, exactly how you do them, how they operate. We're going to get some of the quite granular detail of what happens, because I think for some, that's a helpful thing for you to get a sense of how they operate, how they work. What are some of the things that we found to be foundational? What are the things where there's a lot of flexibility? And we're going to talk particularly about setting your mission vision, which for us is the secret sauce, or the not so secret sauce of what makes them work. So that's the big stuff. There's going to be some other bits we'll put in as well, but that's where we want to go. We want you to get ready to interact and ask lots of questions and clarify all sorts of pieces with that. So, because that's what we want to focus on. So before I say anything else, anyone want to say anything or ask anything or clarify anything at this point?
Yeah, Alex, this is Ken. I was curious about, you mentioned 2% of the people in England, or at least in Sheffield, were Christian. I wonder if, in the past, they probably were a lot more. Are a lot of those immigrants from other places, other religions, Muslim, Hindu, that kind of stuff? Because having been to England, I've seen, a lot of that, and living in the Bay Area, we obviously see a lot of that. So I wonder if there's similarities there. So
it depends where you are in the country. So I think overall in the UK, I think the last stats I saw, it's about 6% is the kind of Christian population, and that's I think that's a fairly loose definition. So what you find with immigration in the UK, it's a little different to here perhaps, which is that immigration to Britain come mostly from either countries that were forming part of the British Empire. So there's a lot of people from the Indian subcontinent.
Pakistan.
So India, so there's a big Pakistani community in Sheffield, for instance. And a lot of people who come from East and West Africa and Southern Africa. And so some of those, obviously, if you're from the Indian subcontinent, not many will be Christian. a lot of the folks from the African nations tended to be Christian nations. So actually some of the most vibrant churches in the UK actually are
Nigerian.
Yes, so exactly. So some very, very vibrant and large, very fruitful churches led by people who've come, or primarily made up of communities who've come from, say, West Africa. So it's a kind of mixed bag, but still the predominance of the population is, would be Anglo in its kind of ethnicity. So the predominance of people who are unsaved and are definitely white in that environment.
Thanks.
That's an interesting question, all that stuff, isn't it? I mean, the city where we were, so the part of time was
there was a big Pakistani population. I don't know what percentage.
Nation. Yeah, I mean, probably in our ward it was about a quarter to a third would have been Pakistani, and there was people from other nations as well. So it was fairly diverse, but just as a kind of test. This is everything. I'll do that. Okay, anyone else want to say anything at this point? All right, what I'm going to do is, what we'll do is we're going to just pop into the chat bar. So let me just put this here. Just the start of a couple of definitions. I'm just going to talk them through with you. So if you want to write, we'll say them out loud, but if you want to copy them down, they're going to be in the chat bar. So what we'll do is we'll define missional community in 3 different ways. So first of all, what's a missional community? Defining it in a sentence. So we would say a missional community is an extended family of relationships centered around Jesus who go and make disciples amongst a specific group of people. So what would you like to say about that?
Yes, I mean, it's the extended family of relationships. So, I mean, that's often the size, so an extended family type size of people, but it's got that feel. So it's more than just a meeting. It's built on relationships. So hence eating together is an important part. And so it's that family type of feel. And then, but it's centered around Jesus. Obviously, that's really important. So it isn't just a, gathering of nondescript nature, but also it is people who want to go and make disciples amongst a specific group of people. And that's the really important thing, which is where we get onto the mission vision, which is you have to be specific about who you're going to go to. So you can't say, I'm just going to go and reach the whole of Fremont, because that's just too broad, too vague, too nondescript. So, for example, in Oklahoma, it was to our specific neighborhood, and it was the same in Ohio as well. But then I also did another one with mums, with other mums. So it's trying to be, it was called Desperate Housewives. I can't remember if I told you this, but it was when that TV show was popular. But it was all these women, mostly whose kids were going back to school, and they were having all this free time, and they were trying to work out, okay, what do we do? Do we go back to the workplace? And the whole thing was, we're desperate for Jesus. But anyway, it's just helping women at that stage of life. So it's being quite specific about who you are going to reach. Do you want to do the 3 words?
So then we put 3 words down to define a missional community. So the 3 words are community, mission, and practice. And we would use these words as a way of both defining a group and also assessing it. So let me just explain them quickly for you now. So the reason we say community is because we want it to become a place where authentic community takes place. Hannah's touched on that a bit with the family language. In the New Testament, the way the church grew was almost exclusively, once you get to Acts 8, where the first martyrdom occurs, from that point on, it's almost exclusively in what they called oikos. And an oikos was an extended household of relationships. In other words, it's your relational network, somewhere in the high teens through to probably 20s, 30s, maybe a bit larger size. So it's your family, your relatives, your neighbors, the people you do business with. In that culture, slaves, it's slave-owning culture, obviously. But the people who you are doing life with, that's who they're seeking to reach. So it's this sense of a dynamic community where people can belong before they need to believe, and they will experience a love and acceptance in that environment. So community is really important. The second word is mission. And that means there is a common shared mission to this specific group of people. So it's around a who, not a what. And that's what gives the group an edge. So it's not just, hey, we have a nice time and hang out together, but actually it's a nice time with a purpose. And then the third word is practice. And what we mean by that is that everyone gets to play. So everyone contributes. You don't need to be saved to contribute. Everyone can contribute. You don't need to be an adult. Kids can speak as well. So whether that's everyone shares food for the meal and everyone shares in the cleanup, but everyone can share their thoughts when you study the Bible. Or if you have a time of prayer, anyone can pray if they want to. And what that means is you live with a certain messiness. It's not going to be as neat and tidy as you would run, say, a Sunday morning service. But because it's a family feel, that works. And what it means is people can be discipled into faith and discipled into the practices and the pathway of following Jesus. And that, obviously that takes place over a process, over a period of time. And what you also do is you are allowing a context where the gifts of the Spirit can be expressed, both the more natural and the more supernatural ones. And it becomes part of your leadership pipeline. And again, most churches do a poor job of having a clear leadership pipeline. Who are you raising up? How are you investing in apprentices and future leaders? But what you find is missional communities is kind of an awesome environment to do just that. You get to raise up more people. So that's missional community in a sentence. Yeah, before we do that, let's just get any comments.
Hey, yeah. I just have a question to clarify. Where does the affinity group come into that? For instance, Scott Wong loves cars, talks cars, has buddies that love cars. Pam Martin and Nancy Estrada and Carol Hardin love art. They absolutely love art, so much so they want to invite people. Vicki O'Donoghue, Priscilla Hyland love elementary school kids. So I think when you say centered around Jesus, I think that's a given, but I'm just trying to figure out where the passion of the people that you hang out with falls into that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's brilliant. Love the question. Brilliant question, Doug. So, say I was in that art group, so I was going to help lead that art group. Then it might be what the community. Well, what you're doing is you're saying we're a community of people who are passionate about art. And we're also seeking to learn from Jesus as we do life. We believe we're a spiritual side to life, and that fuels artistic endeavor, and it builds a sense of community and life together. Life goes better, with Jesus. That sort of idea. And so I think you definitely. So when we say extended family, we don't mean biological necessarily. Some groups are going to be quite heavily biological family. Some groups are not at all.
Most groups are not at all.
So an affinity group is probably the least like that. But think of the sense of, so you could say it's like a tribe, or it's like a gang, or it's like the team, if you're ever on a good sports team, or it's like the band or an orchestra. So if you're doing arts, maybe it would be, it feels, so it's that sense of it's a sense of authentic community centered around this particular thing. An orchestra works because they're there to play the music, but if they do it enough, a healthy group will have life together and a love and a care. And obviously we're centered around, so it might be an orchestra centered around Jesus, so there should be an extra depth of that quality of life together. Push back, Doug, is that what you were getting?
Well, I just think that what we're passionate about is what we're passionate about. Yeah. So it's like, it could be, like the men's ministry, they're passionate about feeding homeless. So that means even though they're a group, they are passionate about reaching out into the homeless in the community. They befriend homeless men and women. So through that, somehow, I'm just trying to think, how do we have the groups of people that love what they love. It's just getting them to this next step of how to turn from, I'm just trying to understand affinity group versus, all right, now we're going to make it missional, I guess. Does that make sense?
So I think what you do is when you're inviting people into this group, so it helps if you've got a group of people who love, say, a particular school district.
Yeah.
The people, so we've done this sort of thing. So you get people who you know who love Jesus, but also love that school district. You say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to start a missional community for this school district or school. And we'd love you to help us be in that, contribute to that, recruit people for that. But then what you do is once you've got the leaders or the Christians brought in, then you have to go and sell the vision to some others. And of course, who knows how many of those people you're going to get, because you can't do bait and switch. You've got to be up front at the beginning. Hey, we're going to start this group. You know, I'm sure we all struggle with our parenting. We just need to support each other. But we also believe that actually Jesus has got quite a bit to say about parenting. He can help us because we believe he created these individual children he's given to us, our gifts, and he will help us to parent these gifts that he's given to us. So, so that's when you call those people, and some people say, I love it. Some people say, I'm not bothered, but I quite like you, so I'll give it a go. And other people say, thanks, but no thanks. And that's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a question. This is Harriet Fong.
Hi, Harriet.
Alex, in one of your classes, you said that we probably would start with about 3 missional groups. FCC has somewhere, I don't know, 12, 14, 16 different groups. How do we go from what we have to what you said in the class?
Well, obviously, if 16 groups are going, that's awesome. So we're not trying to artificially restrict. We're just trying to be realistic, I suppose, which is, here's, rather than think about arbitrary numbers, what I'd suggest is the shift into missional community is defining your group by your out, which is what we're going to talk about in a bit, the mission vision. And so it's looking for the first generation of groups that really want to be a community, but on a common mission. They're defined by that with a crisp clarity of who it is they're trying to reach. And so I think that's, and if it's 1, 2, 3, 5, 17, it's all good. Go on.
So what you'll probably find with those 16 groups is there'll be maybe 1 or 2 who the whole group decides, yes, we've got a heart for X. Let's together decide to change the vision of this group. So it's not just a small group who likes doing Bible studies, but we are now focusing on being missional to this particular, you know, group of people or whatever. You'll get some of those groups where they're just saying, we want to just continue what we're doing, we're not bothered about the missional. You'll get some other of those groups where a few members of those groups say, as well as being in this small group, I actually want to go and join this missional community to go and start something to do with cars or whatever it is. So you'll probably get, they will probably not, all 16 of them are almost certainly not going to all translate or whatever, transition into a missional community. We've tried that in the past. Lots of churches have tried that, and it often doesn't work. So some will choose not to change at all, and some of the people will move and transition and form new groups, and sort of straddling both.
So there needs to be a bit of organization overall of the church, so that we can, is there a kind of like a form that you provide so that each missional group can fill it out so that they can define themselves, so that we can share it with all the other groups and all the other people in our congregation to get us to define those missional groups?
Yes, so part of the point of what we're trying to do here is, I think, is to try and build a sense of, you know, you all together getting, over time, we'll get a sense of where people are at, what people are, where people are feeling, and there'll be some connectivity that happens there. So yes, we'll do some of that and we'll work with people. But I think step 1 is working out what the Lord is saying to you or to you and 1 or 2 others specifically. what your next steps are, and then we collaborate around those things and see where the matchups are.
Okay, great.
Makes sense, Harriet?
Yep, it does. Thank you.
So how it looked when we were at this mega church in Ohio is we worked with a group exactly like this one. We had them all in our living room, and we just sort of sold the vision. We almost did it like a mini group together just to model it. And they all came up, well, not all, but whoever wanted to, came up with their mission vision, how it was going to work. They had their team or whatever. And then basically we had our first launch Sunday, and of course it wasn't COVID. And so we had this like fair at the end of church, and church finished early so everybody could go and look around this fair, and everybody had 10, 20 bucks or whatever it was to have like a table and, you know, flyers and stuff. Say, this is who we are. We've got a vision to meet, you know, to reach this elementary school, or the people who love cars, or whatever it is. So people could see the different visions that people had and think, oh, I really like that, I might join that, or that's not for me, but that's fine. A lot of people didn't join at that time, joined a year or so later when they saw the success of the first groups.
Yeah, and I think to go back to a couple of the questions, it would be just strategically, our experience, and having watched some people do this and it not work, is this is an evolution, not a revolution. I think if you do big bangs, generally they cause big messes. So I would not go that route. So I think that's partly why I said 3, which is an arbitrary number. So I'm not demeaning the opportunities, Harry. I think what we're trying to say is it's better to go kind of gentle, allow some things to get going. You get some proven stories, you get some local stories for you guys. Like, you can borrow our stories at the moment, which is part of what we'll give you. But the best stories are ones that come from FCC people. And then that will just be a gradual progression over time is what you'll see happen.
Okay. Best to only have 1 or 2 successful ones of these that start, and people are looking to them and think, that's amazing, I could do that, but reaching this group of people.
Okay.
Alex, this is Gary. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
How you doing? Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
The groups that we have now, you know, we have a life group that's been meeting for about 3 years now. If I'm hearing you right, the groups that we have currently, home groups, life groups, different groups in our church, may not be, it's harder to turn those into missional communities because it's almost all Christians. I would think that if you invite a non-Christian into a group of 15 Christians, that's going to be real uncomfortable for them. And I know that, you know, when Dave Che was here, he was in an organization called Q Place, and their philosophy was there are 2 types of groups that you can have in a church. The Acts 2 group is your traditional Bible study and so forth, where there's mostly Christians and maybe a few non-Christians. But the Q Place group is when you have maybe 2 or 3 Christians, and most of them are non-Christians, the people that you've been praying for. Like, that's what I'm thinking that your missional community is more like a Q Place group. A few Christians, maybe 2 or 3, but mostly non-Christians.
Let me draw you something. I'm going to put the whiteboard on, and I'll draw you something, a couple of things that might help. So first of all, so we've talked about this before. In fact, I'm going to change that color. Let's use this. We'll just go. So watch my terrible writing. Up, in, out. So the way we define this, I know some people define these things a bit differently, but I want to define them clearly for you all. So by up, we're talking about our relationship with God. So that's, so the way that be expressed is things like worship and prayer and Bible study. In is about our relationships with one another in community, Christian community. So that's the one anothering stuff, it's life together, all those good things. And then the out is the way we impact the wider world. As we go in witness, as we demonstrate the kingdom, as we serve and do signs and wonders and all the rest of it. And what traditionally most Christian groups are built around is they kind of do this. They're in that realm. The thing they're probably, so that, you know, it's gathered around, we're going to get together, it's going to be a Bible study, and we'll pray. We might have drinks together, you know, occasionally we'll do a social, but basically that's the realm they're operating in. And that's not wrong, it's not sinful, you know, but so I'm not saying negative, I'm just describing it. how it actually is. Now, a missional community seeks to do all three of up and out, but the thing is defined by is the out dimension. Right. So the way you might have seen us draw this before. So this is a flashlight, and what we say is the flashlight shapes the other pieces, but you do it through the filter of the out. That's what defines everything else. So the place you start is the out. So who is it do you want to reach? Who are your people of peace? Where is that place of mission? So that's why today we're going to keep circling back around to what is your mission vision? And there's no wrong answer to that. It's all good, but you need to have clarity, because once you have that clarity, it defines everything else. Now, here's what's difficult for an existing group. Let me just erase this. Actually, I'll just go to a different page. So the difficulty for an existing church group, if I just draw the thing again, is the social contract that group has had has been this. Right. Occasionally we do a little bit of something here. So maybe, we perhaps bake cookies for the Christmas carol service or something like that. Or we do maybe we might do a half morning where we go and serve the homeless or something, but it's not a continuous out. And however much we say, or you can bring your friends, the reality is most church small groups don't do that much, or it's an outlier if that happens. And I think what happens is it's almost unfair to say to a group that's been built around this green circle, oh, now we're going to be defined by this. It's because you've actually changed the social contract by which everyone signed up to the group. Every group has a social contract, by the way, which is implicit. But you've changed the deal. It's like, or to change the analogy, it's like the direction on the bus is different now. Right. The bus is no longer going to downtown San Francisco. In fact, now it's going to Oakland. It's a completely different direction. And so you need to give people the permission to say, so if you're an existing group and you as the leaders feel like we want to build a missional community, you need to explain that. But for you, it might be you need to say, hey, we're perhaps going to ask to be blessed and sent out by you all to go and start this new thing. If you would like to come with us, you'd be super welcome, but we need to be clear, this is what it's going to be about. We're going to be built around reaching the families that go to this elementary school, or reaching the sports car enthusiasts, or whatever the deal is, or reaching our neighborhood. And, if that's not your thing, that's absolutely fine. It's not a sin issue or right or wrong, it's just different. But I think part of the transition process is having real clarity about that.
One of the only groups that we ever saw transition was in Ohio, and I can't remember what it's called. Do you remember? It was a group of retired people who they would meet together on a weekly, bi-weekly basis and do Bible study, whatever. But they decided as a group, they all have this heart for, was it young, vulnerable kids or something? Yeah. And so they would go and they fill backpacks at the beginning of every new year. They would do golf fundraisers.
This group lived on a golf course community. They were a golf course community. So they started employing vulnerable teenagers as caddies and then discipling them in the caddying and then forming discipleship groups and raising funds and all the rest of it. So it was a really good shift. So it can be done, but it is very hard to shift an existing group, is all we're saying.
That's what I was thinking.
So that's that picture. Here's how this might look in church life. Okay, so a new picture. I think you all think this is what FCC looks like. So if I said, what's FCC? You would say, this is the group of people. This is the circle around our group of people. Once you start doing missional community, and so basically it's like, who's in and who's out. You have a pretty good idea. You might have one or two bubbles on the edges, but it's fairly close. Once you start doing missional communities, here's what they look like. So maybe Doug starts a group and it's like this. And these people, the shaded, aren't currently Christians, but they get invited into this community that he's doing. Or maybe there's another group which starts and it's mostly people from FCC, but you've got a few people who are outside and they get invited in, which is awesome. And you might have another group where it's like this, and there's just a couple of people from FCC, this currently exists, but most of the folks that they're reaching are well outside. And occasionally, you'll even get, just to scare you, maybe, you'll get a group that's this. And basically, either for reasons of geography or sociology, there'll be a distance. And the way that group gets anchored in is through leadership accountability. So you've got your leaders there, but they're basically almost been sent out. So that's almost like so what this is almost like a planting context.
That was almost like the group in our neighborhood. So we were the only people from this church, and we specifically did not want other people from our church to come because they didn't live in the neighborhood, and they might have freaked some of the neighborhood out.
Which one? So it was a big church, and I was a prominent pastor, so I didn't want all the groupies turning up to hang out with Pastor Alex, because that would have stuffed it up with all our non-Christian friends. So that's partly why we did it, to be really honest with you. So I think you get these different types of church. Now, here's the thing for you to understand, is that as you start to go in this direction, what that means is the shape of FCC changes. So now your shape is this. So when you say, what does our church look like? It looks like this. And even these guys are part of your church. However, the ones who come on Sunday morning are going to be this lot, perhaps, at first. So what that means is your measures of, now it's not, no, hopefully some of them will start to come on Sunday as well.
Or to other events that you offer.
And perhaps these guys start to come on a Sunday. But what the thing you have to remember is that your measure of success is not going to be who rocks up on a Sunday morning service. Because there's going to be some people who never darken your door. So for instance, this group here might be, I'll change the color just to make it clear. This group here might be a bunch of high school students. And so Doug and Alan and some of the others are doing a great ministry of high schools, and they find a way to start to reach a load of high school kids. And they're doing some really cool stuff with them midweek. And they're seeing kids being discipled and saved and nurtured. But it might just be that a lot of those kids are not going to come on a Sunday morning, but they're definitely part of your church.
So 2 examples of that from our church in Sheffield 15 years ago. Basically, one was a group of homeless people who were being saved, but they couldn't cope with a regular Sunday service. So at the same time, they'd have their own service in just a different room or building or whatever it was. And then another separate one we had was a group of Iranians to talk about immigrants. Lots of Iranians coming to the city, fleeing what was going on in Iran. And of course,
there was one guy in our church, so a very English guy, and he made friends with one Iranian man, and that man wasn't yet saved, but was a person of peace. And through that one guy, and he started witnessing to him, this man comes to faith and introduces him to all his network of relationships. And within, it took about 6 months, and we had 50 plus Iranians like getting saved, tons being baptized. And then they were being discipled in a missional community. And for most of them, English was very much a second language. They spoke in Farsi. And as they got discipled, they wanted to start coming to church service. So we ended up buying a load of translation headsets. And so we had a corner of the room where there was Farsi translation going on through the service. I mean, it was wild. It was really totally a God thing. I mean, stories that made you weep. I mean, just so profound what God was doing in their lives and in the community. But so that's another example of where things, now in that case, it actually did end up coming into the service, but sometimes you'll have ones that don't happen. So I think all we're trying to say is your understanding of what FCC looks like is going to change.
It's going to be messy.
I can't remember who asked that question.
I think we went off topic.
We went way off. We chased a few rabbits. Who wants to comment on any of that?
Alex, Hannah, this is Emma.
Hi.
I have a question. You know, this is a great picture. It gives a sense of how the whole FCC organism, if I could say it that way, becomes a lot more organic and living as opposed to one with a fixed boundary. So I love that picture. I'm thinking at this time when I look at a few people that call in to our Sunday service, they're virtual.
Yeah.
And they're calling in sometimes from different countries.
Mm-hmm.
And is there an opportunity that we could think about on how to retain or grow that population of folks that are engaging virtually, but the only mode of engagement or medium of engagement right now is for the Sunday service. I don't know how to think about that, but I just know my family, as an example, back in India, there's just no church happening because technology is not possible. So the only way to go to a service is to attend in person.
Yeah.
And so we're having folks calling into FCC just because that's an avenue that allows them to be a part of worship and listening to God's word on a Sunday, even if it's virtual. So just a question how this can be extended to a virtual community.
Here's what that looks like, Emma. So this is your group in India, or it's people who are internationals or people phoning in. And I've drawn it a different shape because it's going to feel and look completely different to what's gone before in the church. It's like, how does that, like, we might be able to get our heads around a group that's different, but this is like completely different.
Yeah.
And so it's a whole new way, it's a whole new categorization, but it's still part of the FCC family. And it might, I'll just say this just to make the point. It might be that their connection is you. Perhaps you say you end up helping facilitate that. And then interestingly, it's kind of like maybe we kind of do it. I'm trying to just make this up. Maybe it's a dotted line around to say that perhaps they're dialing into the services still, and they're in the service in a different sort of way or whatever. But you'd probably have the thing that would really give it a dynamic would be if you could create some ongoing gathering as well, where they can connect or they can share prayer requests and they can do a lot of the things that happen in group life outside of the Sunday service as well.
With a lot of this, it's trial and error. And so you just totally push different doors and you see what works. And not everything is going to work. Some are going to fail quickly. Some are going to stop after a year or whatever. But unless you try, you never know. And so absolutely we experiment, we just see, and that's where it's all very organic. It's like where you can't be controlling because otherwise it's gonna smother and die. So it's just where it's got to be organic, authentic, and see what happens.
It's a great question, that, and I'm excited you're getting these folks calling in as well.
I have a question. It's kind of a two-parter. I'm trying to clarify this. If you have a group of women, let's say, that are into art, and they want to do this missional community, then they go out and find, their friends or something that are interested in art that aren't Christian, and they say, we've got this group of women of art, and, would you like to join? Is that what they do, that type of thing? Is that right?
Yeah, so you would, gather whoever you know who loves art, and then you get those people saying, hey, every other Friday night or whatever, we do this really fun art activity. And then the other thing that we do is that we just, you have to work out what your spiritual element is, how you talk about Jesus. And you just say, hey, it's really cool. I think you might enjoy it. If you'd like to come, you'd be more than welcome. And that's what you say to your friends, and some will come and some won't. But yeah, it's great.
Okay. I think you answered the second part, because the other thing was, when we do this, do we up front say there will be a spiritual part to this meeting? Up front.
Okay. Do that. Yeah. So never do bait and switch.
Okay.
So if you're inviting someone to something that's spiritual, tell them it's something spiritual.
Okay.
And
otherwise
I think it's awkward. Yeah, it sounds like you believe that anyway. So yeah, and actually what we find is that people are really open to spiritual invitations. Mm-hmm. I think we kind of fear they're going to go, oh no, I'm never going to talk to you ever again, Priscilla, because you said the word spiritual, you said the word Jesus. And actually, I think it's often quite different. People are like, wow, I'm really honored that you think of me, Priscilla. Thank you. And
I get that from my family.
Yeah. Well, family's different. They can't kick you out. So, that's.
But with the art, I can see people who will think, oh, I'd love to do some art. That, particularly at a time like this where there's nothing going on particularly, they think, oh, it just sounds fun. or that group of women or whoever, they sound a great group. I'd love just to get together with them. And you'll have some people who are really up for the spiritual and intrigued and think, oh yeah, that's really interesting. And you'll have some people who go, I'm not convinced. I'm really up for the art and I'm really up for the community, so I'll tolerate the spiritual stuff.
So here, I'm going to brainstorm just to show you the thought process, how you might do something like this. So I'm going to use your art example. So maybe you feel like you've got a couple of people with you, you've got a passion for this. So I might say to the group of people you know, and there might be others who get drawn in. So some are believers, some are not believers. And I might say, hey, we're thinking it would be, we've noticed that in the history of art, there's a lot of spiritual influences, and particularly, I'm a Christian, follower of Jesus, and there's this beautiful track record of Christianity in art and how it's fueled a lot of inspiration and stuff. So what we thought would be really cool to do is, what about if we started a group, we get together every couple of weeks, we'll eat together, we'll have fun. But part of that time would be, we would be reflecting on and thinking about how Jesus can help us as artists, and perhaps we would learn from some of the great pieces of art that are in history, and perhaps have different people guide us as what they've learned from these pieces of art. So you could almost do like a meditation, as it were, or a study of like, here's why I love this piece by Rembrandt or Caravaggio or whoever it is, like paints a biblical scene, and someone can teach on that, just like here's 5-10 minutes of why this is really meaningful. It's going to have a conversation around that. You could perhaps open the Bible passage to compare it to that piece of art. And that would be a really interesting way of doing something devotional and creative. And then perhaps a time where you do a great thing together, or you bring your latest work and you talk about that, or whatever. And then out of that, you might get opportunities to pray with people over time. And perhaps as a group, you might say, hey, what we're going to do is we're going to try and create pieces of art that we can donate to the local, vulnerable women's shelter, or whatever, or people who've got low-income families at the local elementary school, which, by the way, we have another group at, and they can give pieces of art to families who wouldn't otherwise be able to spend money on art. Or, you could do some really interesting things with that and invite your friends, and a chunk of them are not going to be Christians yet, but if they know the deal and they might well be up for that and think, well, that sounds really interesting, I'd like to come to that, and I'd love to contribute to the giving away of art. And now that's not the perfect plan. I'm just extroverting it to give you guys, and for all of you, even if your thing's not art, take that idea and think, well, how would I translate that's the sort of thinking you need to have to be getting out on mission.
So it sounds like you have to be very upfront to say, we're going to talk about spiritual matters. But I think what happens is we went from Q Place to kind of, instead of saying the word Christian, we say, we're going to have some spiritual conversations, but it just sounds like upfront, this is going to be a group where we're going to talk about Jesus.
Yes. And
okay.
Next time when we gather, we're going to spend more time. Actually, we're going to give you some specific coaching on how to start to invite people. So we are going to come back to it, because we know it's a common question people ask. So
a big thing.
It's a big thing, and it's to be honest, it gets better with practice the more you do it. I'm sure you know that, Doug. So it's, but yes, always be open. And we always talk about Jesus. To be honest, we find Jesus is very compelling for people. So that's the language we use. I want to just keep something, because we've not got that long left now. But because we wanted to just dig a bit more into defining groups. So in the chat bar, I'm going to put another chunk of text. For those who want to copy it down, you don't have to, but if that's helpful for you. So what we can think about is how to define a missional community. With this is defining in bullet points, so a bit more information. So Hannah, do you want to talk to the first one or two of those?
Yeah, so basically, in terms of super practical, in terms of numbers, so it's going to be between about 15 and 40 people. That includes adults and it includes children. So so often you get like all these families, and you've got to count the children as well. they do count. They are important. But that's a rough estimation of size. As soon as it's getting up to 40-ish people,
you'll be multiplying well before then. And you might start smaller than that, but one thing is we'll coach on how to do this, but it's you are aiming to get to that scale, because there's something about the sweet spot is in the 20s, because it's the phrase we use, it's large enough to dare, but small enough to care. In other words, there's enough of you that you can dare to do some missional things or some serve things. It's large enough that someone coming in just gets enveloped into this extended family feel. It's a big enough group. And yet it's still small enough where if you come, a couple of times, you're going to get to know everyone's name, or you recognize people, you get to know a bit of their story. You don't know everyone super deep, but you know them enough to feel that sense of community. So we could give you, we've got an hour-long teaching on this. In fact, I wrote a book around all of this. So we could give you tons and tons of sociology about why this does work in human beings. For the purpose of tonight, take it from me, trust me, there's tons, this really is the sweetest size to be on mission, that somewhere in that 20s, 30s sort of scale is where it really works well. You'll find the groups have a tremendous dynamic in life about them at that scale.
The second bullet point is that basically the group's focus is defined by a mission vision to a specific neighborhood or network of relationships. So we've already talked about that. It's not like a small group where you're just concentrating on believers, but you're focused on the out. Who is it? Is it, what neighborhood or what networks? It's the young mums or the cars or whatever. So that is your focus.
Okay.
The third one is it's a disciple-making culture. So basically your whole thing is imitate me as I imitate Jesus. You're journeying on this road together. Nobody's got it. Nobody's ever going to completely get there. But we are focused on Jesus and wanting to orientate our lives towards him.
And that's the primary measure of success, by the way. So if you're thinking, how do I know if we start a group if we're winning? It's the question that it really boils down to. You boil it down to one question: is how many people do you have in disciple-making relationships? In other words, how many people do you have who are intentionally trying to learn from Jesus through you or through others in the group? And that means you're going to have people, because you can have people who are not yet saved who are in disciple-making relationships, but they're on the journey towards Jesus. And of course, it's maybe people who are believers who are actually going on, who are actually walking with the Lord. So the whole culture is one we're making disciple makers. That's what we want to do. We want to see men and women and boys and girls commit wholeheartedly to Jesus Christ as Savior, but also as Lord. And they in turn are seeking to make disciples wherever Jesus has placed them. And that's when you know you're winning. And that's when you start to get the exponential growth kicking in.
Mm-hmm. The next one is there is always an expectation of multiplication from day one. So it's not, again, like a small group where you're not expecting to multiply. You are not going to stay just that same group of people forever. The expectation is, whether it's some of your group, just maybe a couple of people will get a mission vision for something else or somewhere else. And so they will peel off with some other people, or maybe it'll be a whole subset. So sometimes we've had, young family groups, and they've multiplied so rapidly that they just have to almost split into 2 or even 3. So they are going to multiply. So that's, again, a given from day one.
What I want to do, the next heading, I actually want to draw about this just for a couple of minutes, and just to help you understand how this all works. The group, a group will do a healthy mixture of up, in, out. And we actually have terms that we use to unpack these. So I'm going to do up, in, out. And for each of them, there's 2 subheadings which kind of represent the core practices of a missional community. So the way we've always coached our leaders is we don't tell them what to do, but we give them principles to run off. So we would look at a group or with a leader when we're coaching with them, and we say, we want you to do a nice balance of these 3 areas and use these 6 kind of common practices that define what you're about. Now, the way you're going to express them is going to be unique to your group, but here's what you want to do. So, Hannah, do you want to give us the up ones?
Okay, so 2 up ones are creative worship and fresh bread. The creative worship is not going to be sort of your regular worship with the guitar where everybody's singing worship songs, because normally if you've got a smaller group, that gets rather awkward.
Particularly with non-Christians. Non-Christians think it's really weird to stand around and sing songs.
They're not going to know the words. It's just going to not go, on the whole. So occasionally it can work, but on the whole, it doesn't work so well. But you still want to worship and teach people to worship. That's where you think more broadly. So the most basic thing would just be Thanksgiving, because even kids can do that. What are you grateful for? And then maybe pray at the end on the back of that, you know, we're just so thankful and grateful to God. Or it could be, you know, you read a psalm together and just meditate on that for a few minutes. Or it could be you even go outside and maybe you read a psalm about creation. Not that you get too much of this creation stuff, but maybe ask God to speak to us through something that you see outside, whether it's the stars. And you know, God thinks so much of stars, he thinks way more of us, sort of thing. So we've got lots of ideas as to how you can get really creative with worship. But then the second thing is fresh bread. And what we mean by that is, what is the fresh thing that the Lord is saying? So like when you walk past a bakery first thing in the morning or whatever, and you just smell that aroma of bread. Yeah, it doesn't happen too much in the States, but in Europe, on every corner, you have a bakery with fresh bakery. Anybody's been to Europe, and the smell is just amazing. And it draws you in. So what is the fresh bread from the Bible? That, you know, the thing that God is wanting to say to these people right now, that is going to draw them in, that's going to be really helpful for them in their current situation and circumstances.
Okay, I'll do the next. By the way, we're going to unpack these more in future weeks to give you more, but we're trying to give you the overview of this tonight. So we will give you more specific content on this. So don't feel like you've got to get it all right now. Under in, the 2 words are eating and one anothering. So we build around food. This is pre-corona. So we would almost always gather around some sort of food or meal. We make it, because you're trying to build family. What that means is you do it family style. So it's not a dinner party. It's like more like a family picnic sort of vibe. You know, everyone contributes, everyone cleans up. You're trying to make it as lightweight as possible so that whoever's hosting it it's not a massive task. But what eating is about is acceptance, it's fellowship, it's friendship around the meal table. And that's why it's so powerful.
You think in the Bible, how many things happened around a meal table?
Yeah. Jesus spent his time walking and eating with lost people. I mean, that's what he loved to do, and his disciples, and that's how he did a lot of discipleship. One anothering is all the one another commands of the New Testament. And what we find is, as you love and care for and encourage and all the rest of it, that builds a depth in your community life. And we actually find that will naturally lead to subsets, which are small groups or D groups or whatever you call them. So probably we tend to subdivide down in our groups to groups of 3 to 5, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 people, single sex. And that's where we will spend perhaps half an hour of our gathering, you know, praying, sharing, reflecting on perhaps on the fresh bread part. And that allows a depth and more intimate conversation to take place in the appropriate context. And then finally, we've got the out piece. So yeah, why don't you do that?
So basically, out 2 words are demonstrating and declaring the kingdom of God. So with the demonstrating, it's basically serving. So you are demonstrating the love of Jesus with your hands. But also it's not just serving, it is operating in the natural supernatural. So it's praying for people who are sick, or praying for people. So it's doing those people, it's actually doing tangible, hands-on things, but also declaring. It's not just good enough just to serve or even pray with people. We need to give the reason for the faith that we have in you know, the appropriate way, in the appropriate context. To the people who we are wanting to reach.
So that's a very simple overview, and we give that to you, and What you wouldn't do is try and do everything in 1 week. But what you would try is over a period of time, over say three or 4 months, there'd be a mix. Now, again, it's not, what you're not doing is 33% up, 33%. It's not like that either. It's going to be a bit different by different groups. Different groups have different strengths. But, and you actually, interestingly, you as a leader will have preferences. One or two of these will come more easily to you, and one of them is probably going to come least naturally to you. So it's being aware of your own weakness and trying to make sure you don't ignore that area. But there's a balance of them all in your group life. And that's part of what ongoing support for leaders will be, that you get coaching, you get encouragement, you get accountability, that there's that nice mix. And where you're getting stuck, you can get ideas and encouragement and help to get you to breakthrough in that area. Okay, any questions about that?
I have a question. I'm not sure if it really pertains to this, but when you talked originally about up, which is our relationship with the Lord, and in, which is our relationship within the church, and then the out, of course, out. Well, I'm stuck in that up and in because everybody I know is in. How do I go find these people? I've been racking my brain like, who do I know that isn't part of my church? I mean, I've been in this church for 35 years, so
yeah, that's a common issue. And so you might not have people in your life, but there will be lots of other people on this call who do. So you might actually just want to, instead of starting, you might want to start your own group, but you might actually want to see, okay, who else around me is starting a group, and I actually really like them, or I really like their vision, and so I'm going to go and support them and help them in what they're doing, however I can, which is equally valid.
So to give an example, this is an example. This is not telling you what to do, just to be clear. All right, but maybe just because, say Emma shared her thing earlier, right? So say Emma, let's just say Emma starts a group that's really trying to nurture and feed into the folks from other nations who are connecting with FCC. And maybe Emma, and you and Emma get on, and Emma says, oh, I could really do with someone who's a bit more, with a real maternal figure in that group. Would you be interested in coming and being part of the group? And you just love on these people and give them some wisdom, and, you've got experience, you've got life story, you could just help them. And I think that would really strengthen. Or maybe there's another group that someone else starts and says, hey, we're reaching this elementary school and the community around there. And you go, well, I haven't got elementary age kids. And they go, that's fine. But what we need is some like adoptive grannies just to come and love the kids, or come alongside some of these single moms, parents who don't really know what they're doing, give them a bit of wisdom and advice. So I think that's an example where you could come alongside, bring your gifts, bring who Jesus has made you, and supercharge a group that someone else is doing.
People like you are incredibly valuable, because if you're just going in and saying, I just want to love you, love the people who are coming, I just want to serve you, that's so helpful. Rather than having lots and lots of chiefs and no Indians, or lots and lots of people saying, I want to do this and this and this or whatever, then to have people who are just saying, I'm going to serve you and help you however I can, that is, when people say that to us, we're going, yes.
Praise the Lord.
Priscilla, you were the grandma at the kids club every Monday. Don't forget, those 60 kids saw you and they came to you. So you did the out at Hirsch Elementary. So
well, yeah, with the children, yeah. I was.
Well, that's great. That's your value. So let's think in those terms of, that's huge. Just like what Hannah was saying. Grandmas are valued, absolutely, especially with children.
Oh yeah, I love to love on people. It's just that can I contribute bringing people in? That's it. That's my thing. Who do I know that's not a Christian?
That's where we have different gifts, and we value all the different gifts. And people who want to love other people, you can never have enough of those people.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question. This is Jessica.
Hi, Jessica.
Hi. So you talked about having a group of about 20, and I just want to make sure I understand. It's 20 mixture of Christians and non-Christians.
Mm-hmm.
And are the 20 are on a mission, or the Christians are on a mission to the others in that group?
Good question. So I think it's that's and we'll unpack a bit more this next week, just in terms of playing with the language. But I think it's so yes is the answer. So what it is you would be, so for say you're going for a neighborhood group, just a simple example. You might be saying to your friends, hey, we're a bunch of households, bunch of friends, families. We're trying to, we love to be together, but we're also trying to follow Jesus because we think there is a spiritual side to life. We think, we believe that Jesus can help us be better people in the workplace, or better parents, or better marriages, or whatever the deal is. You look at your demographic, who you're reaching, and we'd love to come be part of that. And someone says, well, I'm not a Christian. You say, that's absolutely fine, just come as you are. And they say, I still swear too much and drink too much. And you go, it's fine, come. You'd love it. You're going to be really welcome. And so you invite your friends in there, as long as you're honest about this group is trying to learn from Jesus. That's the phrase I tend to use. You want to practice some phrases, see what sounds most authentic on your lips. But it's so like I say something like, we're trying to learn from Jesus. This world is crazy. And what I've found is that if I can be in community with others and we can be learning from Jesus, I think life goes better. And I just find I do a better job as a parent, as a husband, as in the workplace, whatever. And so I think if you're open about that, what that means is the Christians are saying the same thing. The non-Christians understand that's the thing. They're signing up for that as well. So it's not so much about we're sloganeering, we're reaching the neighborhood. It's more like what I'd say to the group, if you gather with non-Christians there, I'd be saying, hey, our passions, we'd love to see this group grow. In fact, one day we'd love to see this group multiply. Maybe someone here will, God's going to call you to start a group like this in another part of the neighborhood, or a different neighborhood. So I think if you just make it sound very authentic, and it is, as long as it's authentic and it's real, and it's just an overflow of what you're doing, I think people kind of go, oh, all right, that sounds cool. I mean, it's interesting. We've said really open, very missional stuff in front of non-Christians, but because it's been authentic and real, they'll kind of nod and go, all right, okay. To be honest, it's the Christians it's harder to convince. Mm-hmm. The non-Christians don't really know what to expect. They're like, okay, that's what you do then. All right, this group will grow and it'll multiply. All right, fine. Moving on. And all the Christians are going, whoa, what's that about? So does that help answer that?
Yeah, thank you.
It's an important question, so I'm glad you raised it. And I think next week we'll try and circle back around to that a bit more.
Thanks.
We've got some homework we're going to set in a minute, just to warn you, so don't disappear. So Doug's going to ask a brilliant question now.
So, this is Doug, and I have a question. I think maybe some of the guidance needs to have a context within the times that we're living, because, if we're 20 or 30 people, socially distanced, I mean, even difficulty get our church to meet with that many folks. So,
yes.
All of this so far has been not accounting for COVID. So, with COVID, things need to alter and change,
So we've been doing our group mostly online. We had a group before it all erupted, and we've been doing it just about we've been doing it every week online. And what we've found in the last, we've done a few social things with this with another couple or something. And in the last month, we've done a couple of things in the park when we've had perhaps lower numbers.
Yeah. In a socially distanced way.
And allowing, different, I'm sure it's the same for you guys, different people got slightly different perspectives on it all, but we're still trying to do it in a gracious way where, you keep that community but allow some different expressions of that.
Yeah, I guess it becomes more challenging, trying to start a group versus an established group where you can do that.
Yeah. And we can talk about some ways that might be good ways to get around that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's where Emma's virtual group is perfect for right now.
I was also thinking there's just some creative ways to get people together virtually. Now, this is completely in a business setting, I'm saying, but one of the things we're trying out just to get the team together is to say, hey, we'll just do like a cookie baking thing together at a certain time. Who wants to join? Just respond to me. I'm happy to send a kit to you that contains all of the stuff that you will need to bake this cookie, right? And then you just get them together. We'll see how it works out. I don't know, but it's about 10 people. We did another one where we did a virtual game and it was doodling. And, you know, just sort of one where we're trying to, somebody draws something and everybody chimes in on what is it, trying to pick it. So just some creative ways to get people together to have fun or do something together, and then maybe have a conversation as part of it as well.
What we've done, I love that, Emma, that's brilliant. And sounds like you've got tons of great ideas. What we've done with our group, because obviously we're not eating together because we're not in physical proximity. So we shifted that to we do something fun. Because I think one thing that eating does is it kind of breaks down barriers and connect, and fun helps you break down barriers and connect. So with our group, we've got quite a few kids as well as older people in our group. It's quite a diverse age range.
The older people, and everybody's loved these games that we've been doing. Yeah. Everybody's bought in. And
it started by accident, just because the first week one of the kids went and got some goofy sunglasses. And then I went and got a pair of goofy sunglasses, and we were like staring at each other down the screen. And they said, right, everyone go and get your sunglasses. And then week by week, we finished with the game. And some weeks we spent like half an hour on the game. So different people organize different games. But it's been really good for keeping that sense of camaraderie and fun and friendship and fellowship. And doing things that you perhaps wouldn't do if you were physically together. So yeah, there are ways around it. All right, I'm going to set your homework. Here's what we'd like you to do, which is we'd like you to go away and start to think and pray really, really seriously. Some of you have been doing this, I know already, but if you were to start a group in between now and next summer, let's just say, what is the mission vision? In other words, who would you like to see reached? And what we'd like you to do is if you're starting to get some ideas, we want you to be able to write it down in 1 or 2 sentences. So not an essay, not an epic, 2 sentences max, but it must be specifics. In other words, and what I'm going to get you to do is you're going to submit these. And if Hannah and I look at yours and we could join your group, then that means it's way too broad.
Almost certainly.
Except possibly Emma's group. All right. But so in other words, it's no good, like Hannah said, you're not saying we're trying to reach everyone who loves sports cars, because that's too vague. You need to like have some specificity in there as well. So be specific. It's best to be over specific than under specific. You can push that margin out. That's not that difficult to do. So who would you love to see reached? What would be the focus of a group if you started one?
Now, what happens if people have got more than one? I mean, so when I was in this position a few years ago, I had multiple groups. So we were doing stuff in our neighborhood. I was doing stuff with women whose kids were going to school and suddenly had all this time on their hands. But there were also some other soccer families. So for me, I almost have 3 different groups. So are you going to say they can write more down?
Yeah, so now? Brainstorm them down. And then what I'd suggest you do is you talk and process with your married or with a friend or someone, and just think what you want to think about is, and we're going to come to this next time, so don't worry if you don't get this sorted, but basically it's where is the lowest hanging fruit? So pray about it. If the Lord says something specifically like do the soccer families, then obviously you do the soccer families. But in the absence of him giving you a specific direction, say you've got 3 or 4 different options, I would be pragmatic. So I would probably go where would be the easiest place to start a group?
Do they need to narrow it down right now, or could they keep a few of them as
keep a few and then bring them next time, and we'll process some more and help you get clarity. And to pick on Priscilla because she raised this. So if at the moment you feel like I don't know, that's absolutely fine. So it might be that the Lord wants you to to go serve alongside someone else. So, you know, if that's where you get to, fine. But you need to genuinely pray about this. All right. So don't just let yourself off the hook. Engage with it properly and start to think, you know, where might it be? It might be the Lord says to you, here's the plan, but you might look at it and think, I realize that's going to take a little bit of time to get there. And maybe what might happen is that might be a dream in your heart, but for the first 6 months, you're part of someone else's group, serving them, and then you'll get planted out to start your group. That might be a thing that happens. So don't feel like just because you get specific, you've got to start imminently. It might be, it takes a little bit of time. So that we're just trying to give you some options here as you think about it.
Any questions?
Is that clear? Anyone not sure what we're asking you to do? Okay, so it's going to be wet cement. This is version 1.0 or 1.5 if you've been working on it already, whatever.
So it's not, you have freedom to morph and change this. You do not have to get it completely sorted the first day. So just because, you know, you've got to write down your mission vision doesn't mean to say it's going to be perfect. It's got to be handed in. You're going to be marked on this. I mean, it's a journey. It's fluid. It's lightweight.
What we'll do is I will send to Roger and we'll some examples of some other groups, half a dozen examples, and then they can send that round to you. We'll just get your brains going, give you some examples. That can be helpful too. Okay, we're done. Mr. Roger.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Hannah. Couple of quick questions. Well, first one isn't a question. We're not back next week. It's in 2 weeks. So everybody gets an extra week in terms of that homework assignment. You kept saying next week, but it's
next time.
Sorry.
September 8th. The other question I think is that is there a way that people can email you with special questions that they might have, Alex, in terms of reaching out to you one-on-one and beginning to be able to pick your brain and get your expertise as they start to explore?
We'd be delighted to do that. Yeah. So perhaps if we send you the examples of some mission vision statements, and then as you send it, whoever sends those out, put our email address in, and then boom. Yeah, and I'll put it in the chat now as well. Okay. Those who write it down right now.
So if everybody goes to the chat room right now, it is there.
It will be in a second.
Okay,
not yet. It's coming. Wait for it.
It's Alex at dandelionresourcing.com and Hannah at dandelionresourcing.com.
And then Hannah, they can do the same thing in terms of getting.
Yeah.
Just in terms of Hannah.
Yeah, I'm just putting mine on too. I think we spelled that right. So it's, yeah, basically Alex and Hannah at dandelionresourcing.com.
If you've got a difficult question, send it to Hannah.
Doug, did you hear very clearly tonight the question that you asked in our leadership team meeting just last week in terms of the issue about bait and switch? Did you hear clarity in terms of that answer tonight?
Yeah. You got to be really upfront is what I learned. So yes.
Okay.
So it wouldn't really work at a skate park right now, but this makes more sense. So.
But you know, at the same time, you know, you don't necessarily have to do the missional community to begin with. You can just build relationships first of all. That's what we did. Build relationship, and then when you've got some relationships, then you can offer, we'll do this. And not all of them will take you up, but some hopefully will.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Alex, Hannah, thank you for a good beginning. This was a great overview. I'm really looking forward as we get more into the specifics and helping people in terms of launching that. I love the response to Priscilla in terms of not everybody's going to start a group, but everybody can be in a group and play an important role in that group, because there's room for everybody, their gifts, their uniqueness, their identity in that group. You don't have to be the leader. So, Doug, would you take us out in prayer tonight?
Which Doug?
You.
Jesus, thank you so much that we're just here. It's great to see everybody's faces. It's great to see that we can kind of try to make sense of this, Lord. But thank you that, as Alex and Hannah have said, you're worth talking about. You are good news, especially in this time right now where people are anxious and not sure of who's in control of what. But Jesus, thank you that you are good news, and thank you that you have all the power and the authority, and that we will listen to what you're saying to us, and we want to do what you tell us, Father. So just thank you for tonight, and just bless everybody and their families and their grandkids, and give everybody traveling mercies if they're traveling. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for participating in a great kickoff.
Hey, I'd like to add, Alex.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for your kind words on Sunday. Good job, man.
Thank you. Thank you.
And if any of you guys would like to share this recording, it will be online in the next couple of days. So thank you guys for joining. Have a great night. We will see you in 2 weeks.
Will, you gotta get some light on you, man.
we don't want light on Will. We don't. I'm just kidding.
No, he's
kidding.
right. No, he's exactly right. Have a great night, guys. God bless you.
Everybody.